Greetings, traveler. You might have heard the legend of the 10x engineer in app development companies. And you might be wondering, well, that may hold true for engineers, but is it also true for game designers, artists, and sound designers? Well, today what I want to do is first break down what this concept means to begin with, and then share from my experience how it applies to other roles within the games industry. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 14 years now in places like Electronic Arts, Cygames, Tri-Ace, and a few others. And ever since the phenomenon of the 10x engineer came about, there were certain questions that started getting asked about other positions. But let's begin with what this 10x engineer is. So I think it started from the Silicon Valley, and there they figured out that if you have one really good engineer, then he has the output of basically 10 simply good or normal quality engineers. So if it takes 10 engineers, let's say 10 days, 10 working days to output one piece of code, one feature or something like that, then the very experienced, very senior, very high skill engineer can do the same output in one day. So is this true for other positions? Does this still hold true for the games industry? The short answer from my experience is yes. And here you might be wondering, well, how can it be possible that one, let's say, game designer can output the same amount as 10 other game designers? That is an excellent question, and that is what I want to break down today. So let's imagine how a task gets delivered to a team usually. So there will be a meeting. Typically the game director is going to be in the meeting, and he will say something like, okay, we need a new type of weapon for the game. We have some other weapons in the game already, but we need a new type, and it's going to have broadly these requirements. Now you guys go ahead and create it and check back with me when it's ready in the game design document form to begin with. So let's imagine that there's 10 game designers in the meeting who receive this task. Now, realistically, it's not going to be all 10 game designers that work on the same task, and realistically, it's not going to be 10 game designers to begin with. There has to be some sort of a manager that's involved in this, so a project manager or something similar. There will have to be someone also collecting all the knowledge that's necessary to act upon this and to check the relationship with the rest of the game. But anyway, you get the idea. This task is broken down to 10 more junior people. Now, each individual person is not going to do overlapping work with everybody else. In this case, they will try to break down the task further and try to work as efficiently as possible together. And that is where the slowdown happens, I think. It's not that that team is doing a bad job or that they have a wrong method or something. They're doing their absolute best, and they're interested in the task and so on. But due to the nature of working in a team, communication naturally slows down progress. It's something that always happens to all teams. The more people that are involved, the greater the need for communication to make sure that everybody's heading in the same direction with their work. So because the people are more junior in this case, it naturally also takes more time to complete one task. There is a lot of time devoted to researching the game in its current form, since it's common that the bigger the game, the lesser known some areas of the game are, if someone's not working with that area directly for a while. Also, there might be errors in direction still, or there might be communication that happened too late or didn't happen at all, even though communication is something that's supposed to happen. One of the team members might be pulled aside to work on some other task, do some firefighting, work on something else and so on, help someone. And the longer the task takes overall, this little project takes overall, then the the higher the chance that these slowdowns and miscommunications and loss of focus for due to other tasks is going to happen, basically. So it's not uncommon for something like that to take, let's say, 10 business days to complete for these 10 people, imaginary 10 people in our team. So there you have a benchmark and a general idea of how this can happen. Now, does this always happen this way? No, of course not. Sometimes it takes less time, sometimes you have fewer people, and sometimes it takes way, way more than 10 business days. Again, depending on the situations and from what I've seen in my experience. So then the question becomes, how on earth can one person who is not the game director and presumably not as experienced or not as knowledgeable about the game and the game vision create the same amount of output but in one day? Well, this happens simply due to that person's own experience and understanding of the game. So indeed, maybe there's limitations in his understanding of the game, and of course maybe he doesn't know everything, but because he's worked on many other games, he starts to see the commonalities between all projects. Also, being able to take an idea from a concept in his mind and put it on paper or on Confluence or whatever the team is using is an easier process for that person. So long story short, because of experience and because that person knows how to turn this concept into something that can be shared with others so quickly, it can happen something like this. So the same meeting happens with the game director. The director says, I want you to design a new weapon class that does so and so. And so if this happens in the morning, then it's not uncommon for that person to have the first draft ready by noon. And since all game elements are typically shared with several games, so now we're using a weapon type as an example. So there's many games out there that use multiple weapon types. So if it's an experienced game designer, chances are he has either worked with something like this in the past, or in the very least played enough games and has enough examples in his mind to know the critical elements he needs to include in his design. So starting work in the morning, by noon or so, he can have the very first draft ready. Now, is this draft going to be perfect? Of course not. It's going to be very, very flawed. But he typically has the confidence to put all the things he believes are necessary for this new weapon type down. And what this achieves is that this can be shared with the game director, and it can be shared with other team members as well for feedback. And then once all that feedback is received, let's say sometime around noon, then typically he has 80-90% of the information he needs to push this to completion. So is this completion going to be same day in the evening or next day in the morning? It doesn't matter that much, but basically here you have a roughly 24-hour cycle from the assignment of the task to the completion of the task. And again, you might be wondering, how is this person so quick, and why can't more junior people put their thoughts on paper more quickly, and what makes such a big difference? If I had to answer, I would say experience in the sense of what not to do. So in my view, all experience is that, telling you what not to do. If you know all the pitfalls to avoid, then you have basically no choice but to go towards the right direction, or to the more desirable direction at least. So it's not that the others, the team of the 10 people is doing something wrong. It's that they will fall into the same pitfalls that the more experienced person has fallen, and they will need some time to basically dig themselves out, which is a completely natural part of the progress. So what does this tell us? What does this teach us about this process? Well, one very, very obvious takeaway from this is that typically the senior person is going to require a higher salary. How much higher? It could be 30% higher than the junior person. It could be 50%. It could be 100%. 200, 300% higher. It's entirely possible, depending on the actual level and his experience. And this is where most companies would say something like, "Why on earth would we pay so much money? He costs more money than some engineer or I don't know, some marketing person. I don't know. Why on earth would we pay so much money?" Well, if you think about it, financially and mathematically, this makes a lot of sense. Let's say someone costs twice as much as another person, but has 10 times the output. Wouldn't that be a good trade to make? Wouldn't that be in the interest of the project and of the game in general and of the company itself? And also imagine the reduced complexity in management and communication, right? If some task has to be first split up and communicated to a team, there's a lot of overhead that goes into communication, coordination, division of tasks, all that stuff, making sure that everybody's on the same page from the beginning until the end of the project. If the task is given to a single person, mostly that overhead can go away, basically. So at this point, you might be wondering, well, that's great if you manage to find a senior designer like that, but what about the junior people? What are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to get experience if everybody now prefers these more senior people? Well, I think there's two scenarios here, right? Either there is a senior person to guide the junior members and to sort of set templates for how to do the work and set best practices and so on. And by doing that, not only that speeds up the junior team, but it also teaches them best practices and it gives them real world experience. If that more senior person is not present in the company at all, then it's basically through trial and error that the younger staff or the more junior staff have to go through the pitfalls, dig themselves out, become stronger, and keep on learning. But again, that's nothing bad. That's as things should be, and it's completely normal. And you also might be wondering, okay, so that might be the case for the game design team, but what about the artists? What about sound designers? What about members in other positions? Again, from my experience, it's not very different for people in those places. There is something to say about the type of senior person and the type of employee in the company in general. So there is a distinction between the maker and the manager. So typically the maker will be very good at single output. So by himself he can create a lot of output, but he's not very good with communication and he's not very good with organizing others, and or if he's good, he doesn't want to do it. It's not natural for him, and so on. Conversely, the manager type might not have the highest skill in the team, but because he can organize more people, overall the team or the company can have greater output from the more junior members. That's not to say that this manager type wouldn't have enough skill to do the same thing by himself. It's just that the team gains more value out of him organizing others than him like sitting quietly at his desk and outputting all day. So that's my observations from my time in the games industry. That's what I'm noticing as well. Whenever I have an opportunity to work with a higher level person, I'm always inclined to take it because I know the speed up it will have on the project. I know that even if he's 2-3 times more expensive, typically he has a dramatic effect on the speed of the project. So if I'm lucky enough to come across someone like that, I typically am interested in the opportunity. Anyway, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening to this. And if you have any questions about the situation, or if you're wondering how that would work in a particular project, or why something in this process is so, I'd be happy to answer in the comments. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have fun.